From where? Are we doing it? Are we live?
Yep, yeah, we got it. Perfect. Great, yeah, so I'm just gonna double check that. All right, so thank you everyone for joining us. We are here with Natalia Oberti Noguera, who's joined us for our first LEAPFROGers live session. I'm Nalwyn Dalil. I'm a member of the Brava team, and I'm working on the launch of LEAPFROG, a book written by our CEO, Nathalie Molina Niño. Thank you for joining us, Natalie, and dealing with our little tech snafu in the beginning there.
Hey everyone, I think you were introducing me, Natalia. You have so many Nats in your life, Nolwenn.
Natalia, yes. Got messages
I'm just gonna give you kudos that you got my two last names right. I'm so proud of you. I often tell people you can butcher my name as long as you end in an that's all I ask. I am so thrilled to be the first ever guest that you have, interviewee for the hashtag LEAPFROGers live event. So everyone checking this out, if you have hacks, if you have questions, make sure to send them using the hashtag LEAPFROGers live. We'll be checking Twitter, probably Instagram, and of course Facebook. So post your questions, post your hacks so we can share them and spread the word. And I'm really excited to be supporting you. I'm so proud of your book launch. And of course, special shout out to Lila. You know, she's my favorite Molina Niño.
Great. So you are the founder and CEO of Pipeline Angels, and you are mentioned in LEAPFROG hack number 42, which is build a movement and then a market. So for our viewers who aren't yet familiar with LEAPFROG, which launches on the 28th, and Pipeline Angels as well, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yes, so as you mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Pipeline Angels. I am a cis queer Latina. My gender pronouns are she, her. And whenever people ask, like, what does Pipeline Angels do? What is that about? I often have a question right back at them, which is like, do you watch Shark Tank? Are you familiar with Shark Tank? And then, of course, a lot of people know it. Nolwenn, do you watch Shark Tank?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So I like to say there are enough white guy sharks out there investing in other white guys. I'm in the business of creating more women and femme sharks so that we can invest in each other, because the more of us that are on the investing side, the more of us that will be funded on the startup side. So that's what we're up to.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. I love that. And I think specifically in Build a Movement, Then a Market, your hack, you talk about and Natalie mentions your movement towards sober events and putting the safe spaces at the forefront of your decision making. So what brought that on, and what kind of made you make that decision to make your events sober?
Well, you know, for us LEAPFROGers, I think that a lot of us would agree that a lot of hacks come because as solutions to the status quo. Oh my gosh, I love it. Let's make sure to this is like a quotation. I can already see it. I can already see it in all the branding for the book. So yeah, a lot of hacks come as a solution to status quo. And the status quo for me, they reached a tipping point. I had spoken at a conference, and just randomly the conference organizer / curator / host was like, we're going to have a drunk talk. That's what he called it. And of course, I tried each way. Like I spoke with the president of the organization who was there. There were some board members there. I spoke with the host, the curator, and I even sent like stats and a report that at the time it said something along the lines of like that when there's alcohol in the workplace, at conferences, at events, it makes particularly women feel more unsafe. And so there are all these stats, and then it was almost like people were shrugging, the shrug emoji, right? Like that's they were like whatever. And I think the part that kind of like frustrated me even more was the fact that this was on the main stage. So even, there are a lot of conferences and events out there that like you have a choice of which panel to go to, right? Like at 2 p.m. you can go to the drunk talk, or you can go to the not drunk talk, right? So the fact that even in terms of talking about a movement, in terms of talking about community, the fact that in order to be part of this community, in order to be part of this event on the main stage, you either had to opt in to the drunk talk or you had to opt out of the entire conference experience. And I thought that was really unfair. And what bothered me was I did all the quote unquote right things. I escalated it. I gave like stats to showcase that this was not the way to go. I spoke with several different, people on the team, and the show still happened, and so about like a month after that conference, I was speaking at another conference, which actually was a phenomenal conference in Portland called DazzleCon. That one I will name because they're amazing. So check out zebrasunite.com. I think that's what their website is. And someone approached me and they were like, oh my gosh, loved your talk at PopTech. Oops, I name checked them. But like, can you believe what they did, that they had that drunk talk? And I was like, whoa, it's not just me. Other people are still thinking about that. It's not like it happened and it was forgotten. Like it made a negative impression on a lot of people. And so that's when I told myself, I realized, and by the way, like just kind of like another flashback, I had spoken at another panel at another event a few years back, and they had a bar at this event. And so I went to get some water, and the bartender was like, are you sure you don't want anything else? And I was like, yes, I just want water, thank you. And then the bartender was like, are you sure? Like several times. And I remember in the moment thinking, wow, it's easy for me to say, yes, I'm sure. Like the bartender could have asked me 10 more times and I would have said yes. However, maybe someone in recovery, it might have been a harder situation. And so with these, like layers added, I was like, well, I wasn't able to change how those events behaved in terms of their policies, in terms of their how they were doing, how they were doing it. And I was like, what I can change is what's happening at Pipeline Angels. So in some ways, I was like, we can model a different sort of culture, a different sort of behavior, a different sort of expectation in terms of what it means for business events. And one of the more moving things was the feedback that we got after we announced our alcohol-free culture, and specifically emails and tweets and messages from a lot of people in recovery who are sober, who said that this was the first time that they felt comfortable and excited to go to a professional event, because they often have to put themselves in a precarious situation just for the opportunity to network. And there are studies out there that showcase that your next promotion or a stretch assignment or getting FaceTime with like the boss, etc., those happen at social/professional networking events that have alcohol. And so I wanted to create the situation that was all about like people opting out of these unsafe environments into one that is like we're opting in to this space that we're creating in a very intentional way. And I have a friend, Sabrina Hersey Isa, from Bold Media, and something else that came up in our conversation is that there are people, it's not just about like people who might be in recovery or people who don't drink. It could also be people like due to faith and religions. Like there are different reasons why someone might not be into having alcohol in like mixing with events. And so I'd say it's funny that you brought that up, because in some ways it's like I remember someone asked like, oh, like oftentimes when people create these new policies, it's because, oh, there was an issue, so you had to create this new policy. And in some ways there were issues outside of Pipeline Angels, and what I wanted was Pipeline Angels to model a different way that you could of what success means, for an event.
Yeah. So instead of being a response to something it's proactive.
It's about leapfrogging a situation.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Yeah. And did you have any like notable pushback? Because I think like, as you meant, like kind of drinking can be a big part of the culture of business, and specifically conferences and events, like, did you have anyone whether within Pipeline Angels or outside, push back and say, we're not going to have as much success if we do this, and people aren't going to want to come to our events, or that kind of thing?
So it's interesting because number one, just in terms of our demographics, we work with women and femmes. So anyone identifying with womanhood, cis, trans, third gender. Mm-hmm. And so even in terms of when we think about a lot of these, events and like when alcohol is in a situation that is creating, and this is where I would say it's not creating, but maybe people are using alcohol. They're throwing alcohol under the bus, because actually it's people who are, being harassers, etc. Oftentimes it is in situations where it's a more gender diverse demographic, like i.e. there are tons of guys there, right? And so what's interesting is that there wasn't a need in the sense of like, things are getting out of, place, etc. There wasn't a need for us to have instituted the policy. And so what we've actually had in terms of feedback is just a refreshing conversation around how alcohol doesn't necessarily, like, who said that alcohol needs to be part of these, these events. So I think that what has been more is like people, and this was my hope, that we could serve as a model, and then people saying, you know what, actually, I'm going to try this out at my company, or I'm planning an event and I hadn't thought that this could be something that I could do. And so that was really like the hope, was to inspire others to rethink what success means, and why does alcohol have to be part of like the success formula, for great events.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and kind of wondering where that comes from and how that. But so I'm just going to shift gears a little bit and ask kind of a larger entrepreneurship question. And what advice do you have for underestimated entrepreneurs who are looking for potential investors? How can they kind of get that going, get that started?
So number one, obviously shout out to Arlen Hamilton, who is actually going to be one of the future leapfroggers you're going to be interviewing from Backstage Capital. The reason I love the word underestimated is especially Arlen has this fabulous shirt that has the word underrepresented crossed out, and our underestimated is instead added underneath. And it's so much about, hashtag language matters. It's about reframing. It's about how people think about situations. And so with that, with that preface, in terms of just advice, I'd say I'd say the people who need more advice is the status quo. Like how should you be valuing underestimated founders? Why? And because there's a lot of conversation regarding, okay, so we need to learn the game, learn the rules as underestimated founders, all these things, and yes, we need to do that. At the same time, we also need to acknowledge that the game, in as much as even if we learn the game and learn the rules, we still have to wait for those gatekeepers to invite us into the game. And so that's what Pipeline Angels, what they did was really about creating new games, right? Creating new games that had accessibility and access at the forefront, and that we were thinking about inclusion from the beginning, and that intentionality is important. I'll say something else, in as much as I just said that, I'll be provocative and turn it on its head again, which is that what Pipeline, what our members really are doing, they are the friends and family round for a lot of entrepreneurs who don't have friends and family, who don't have that early critical capital injection. And one of the, I'd say, value adds that our members are providing is that they are helping these entrepreneurs create a runway to actually make it in the status quo. And the reason that I think it's really important to create new systems, create new games, and also we still have to, work within the current systems, is that there's a lot of money stuck in the status quo. And so how can we And that's one of the reasons that I love this book, and the concept that Natalie has regarding, leapfrog hacks, is because it's acknowledging that there's still a lot of hacking that we need to do to make it in the status quo, and knowing that, how can we share this knowledge so that so that we can be able to get more of us to leapfrog. I'd say, like, there was just right now, like, an expletive. I was like, I got distracted because Natalie was like, expletive, the friends and family round. And this is where I'd say one of the reasons that I'm so excited to support Natalie is that we differ. I actually believe that the friends and family round is important. And that's why I'm creating more friends and family for entrepreneurs who don't have the friends and family round. It's important for us to have that early support. And so the other way to go about it, which is like what Natalie's bringing up, is like, okay, so if we're not able to create, that support, what other options are out there? I believe that there are tons of people out there that still can be activated to serve as the friends and family, and that's the work that I'm passionate about doing. And at the end of the day, I view it as economic justice, because what we're talking about is redistributing wealth so that there's more of us that have an opportunity to co-create it. Because at the end of the day, that's what, like, investing is about. It's about creating more wealth. And so for me, I want to make sure that those of us, as using Arlen's word and the word that you mentioned, those of us who are underestimated, we get that chance to create, to be part of creating more wealth for our communities and bring that back. I say the only other thing that I just remembered was Frida Caper Klein from Caper Capital. She has this saying, which is a very, like, vivid / visual one, which goes back to the whole leapfrogging, which is that we need to stop rewarding those who start at third base as if they had hit a home run. And so in some ways, like, that visual, already some people are starting off, and I'll be generous, second or third base, not just third, second or third base. But at the same time, what I love about the word leapfrog, and leapfrog hacks, is that a lot of us are not starting, like, at second or third base. We're not even starting at, like, from the it's almost like we're, like, negative, like, we're starting outside of the field. Like, how do we actually get into the field? Like, where do we get like the bat? We're like, and so that concept of us being able to share these hacks so that we can leapfrog and kind of then have, like, a chance, have a chance at making it in the status quo is so powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And how would you say that your experiences as a Latinx founder have shaped the way you run Pipeline Angels? How has that kind of idea of starting not even on second base, first base, home, but outside the field, how does that impact the way you run Pipeline Angels today?
Yeah, so number one, thank you, shout out. Latinx is, like, I love that word, especially because it's once again, I said hashtag language matters. And so Latinx is really for those hanging out with us right now who might be like, what are you talking about? Is a really it's a word that is more gender inclusive, and especially for non-binary people who, we have Latina, we have Latino, and then there are Latinx, non-binary peeps that they might not use Latino, they might not use Latina. And so Latinx is that inclusive word that makes sure that we're representing that broader community of Latinx people. So, like, shout out, Nolan, thanks for making my day. In terms of, I'd say for me, how did who I am bring me to what I'm doing? I'd say two things. The first one was, when I was growing up, I really wasn't ever introduced to someone and was told that so-and-so is a boss, so-and-so is a founder, so-and-so is an owner, so-and-so is an entrepreneur. So I didn't really have the language to know that, hey, actually, I could be an entrepreneur. Hey, actually, I could be a founder. Similarly, I will say, I didn't really meet someone. I grew up primarily in Latin America, and I didn't really ever, like, meet someone that I remember, like, and was told so and so is queer, so and so is, like, LGBTQ. And so and this is where like I make my kind of preface in terms of like, you know, there are a lot of like conservatives out there that are like, oh my gosh, the media is making people queer. And I'm like, no, the media is helping us realize who we are, because with examples, with stories, and shout out to another white Latina, Jennifer Lopez. I think one of the most amazing things that J-Lo has done was executive produce The Fosters, which is, I don't know if you've come across that show, which is a phenomenal show. And it really happened thanks to J-Lo. I think it was her aunt maybe who's LGBTQ. And so the fact that she knew someone in the community and wanted to help amplify the message that hashtag love is love is so powerful. And so for me, being one of the, it's really hard being an entrepreneur. The other thing is that I get to be my own boss. I'm not afraid of getting fired. I'm not afraid of repercussions. I'm not afraid of like potentially missing out on a bonus or missing out on a stretch assignment or missing out on a promotion for who I am, for being who I am. And so I want to leverage that, in some ways, that privilege of being my own boss, to be out, to be proud, to be vocal, so that I can help create a culture where other people who maybe aren't entrepreneurs, who are, you know, professionals in the corporate world, that they get to be who they are without concerns. You know, still in the US, it's 2018, and there's certain US states that are working to bar LGBTQ couples, you know, from, I think it was in Texas, from being able to adopt kids. And, you know, this is where like people are like, Natalia, we were talking about like fundraising and capital and founders, why you're bringing this up. And it's because it's interlinked. You know, the political is personal, the personal is business, the business is political. And so with that in mind, kind of like full circle to your question, these are two parts, you know, like not realizing that I could be a founder, and not realizing that I was LGBTQ sooner in my journey. And I'm actually wearing a shirt. Let me know if like you can read it. It says,
there you go.
There it is. I'm changing the face of angel investing. And so one of the reasons that our tagline at Pipeline Angels is so literal, like we're literally changing the face of angel investing, is because I want, even though I didn't have those role models while growing up, letting me know that I could be a founder and entrepreneur, I want to make sure that for those out there, that they have so many role models to consider, like, hey, actually, I could be an angel investor. Actually, I could be doing this. That's something that I think is really important. Marian Wright Edelman says, you can't be what you can't see. And so I'm so proud of our members that they are both they're becoming these angel investors, they're starting this angel investing journey, and they're also becoming symbols and hubs for their own communities, because oftentimes they might be the first and only angel investor that they're, you know, in their community that someone might know. And of course there are some business models that might not be a good fit for angel or VC funding. And there are some that are scalable and are, and that entrepreneur might not realize that a way that they could help grow their businesses is by getting angel or VC funding, which is by now knowing someone in their network that is an angel investor, that's opening up the opportunities for them.
Yeah. And how, like you had mentioned, kind of the status quo and working in that, but also challenging it. How do you build a trusted brand in a field that's so dominated by a demographic that's different than your own?
You're so diplomatic, Nolan. You mean by like cis straight white guys, right? Those are the ones you're talking about?
We'll go. Yep.
I'd say, so you mentioned the word trust. It's interesting to think about trust in that context. I'd say I'll take a step back and I'll say, why is it that the alternative is the one that needs to, you know, build trust for in some ways? I'd say like the status quo has lost lost a lot of trust. Like, there's like hashtag Me Too that also happened in Silicon Valley, and one of the reasons that that's happening is because even when we talk about venture capital, I'd say especially for those first timers, they are very similar to an entrepreneur, because what do first time VCs have to do? They have to raise their, first fund. They have to, guess what? They have to have a friends and family round, oftentimes, helping them build that first fund. And who tends to have the friends and family, to raise their first fund? It tends to be generally like white guys. And who tends to be those friends and family that are investing in those white guys? It tends to be other white guys. And so for me, even as I'm talking about changing the face of angel investing, now we have over 300 members who have invested over $5 million in over 50 portfolio companies, which I'm so proud of. Over 20% of Pipeline Angels portfolio companies have a Black woman founder. Over 12% have a Latina, a hashtag Wise Latina founder. Over 26% have an LGBTQ founder. And I want to say it's like over 44% have a founder that's 40 years and older, which also ageism is an issue. And a lot of our portfolio company founders fall into more than one. So, for example, like we have Stephanie Lampkin, founder of Blendor, queer Black woman. So like more than one of those buckets, and so we have. One of the things that for me was important was like there's a lot of conversation about pattern recognition, about pattern matching, and that like people invest in what's familiar, people invest in what looks like them. And so I was interested in turning that on its head and in saying, okay, if we invest in what looks familiar, if we invest in what looks like us, let's get more of us on the investing side, because we're probably going to be more open about investing in more of us on the entrepreneurship side. And so our members reflect that. I want to say, I have it right in front of me because I want to make sure that like I give you the like the breaking news stats in terms of so in terms of our members. I'll start with the depressing stat, because like that one is like, I think it's something like the Angel Capital Association came out with a study that said that in the US, here it is, 1.3% of angel investors are Black, 5.7% are Asian, 2.3% are Hispanic, which I think Natalie and I both agree that we prefer Latinx to Hispanic. So that means that close to 90% of angel investors in the US are white, which is like pretty depressing in terms of lack of diversity. And so with respect to our 300 plus members at Pipeline Angels, 13% are Asian, 18% are Black, 7% are Latinx. Especially, those numbers still, I want them to grow. However, they're more than double the status quo. And so when we think about trust is also, does someone see themselves in the community? Are you represented in the community? And so that's what we have. We have the community represented at on both sides of the table, and that is actually in some ways one of the first steps, or hacks, should I say? One of the first hacks to build trust is to actually have the community that you are, you're focused on be represented in the leadership, in who is making, in the decision makers. Like that's a big. If you do that, you can leapfrog a lot of stuff. Oh my gosh, I hope Natalie like is proud of like all these ways that I've been able to integrate the brand,
Yeah, fantastic. And in building the idea of having people see themselves as a company, have you ever had moments of doubt or moments where you kind of come up against a wall where you're not quite sure how you're going to get over it? And how have you kind of conquered those moments of doubt? And any advice for someone who thinks they just can't get over that wall?
So I'd say a few years ago, I was on a judging panel for Startup Weekend. And on the panel was this white guy, a co-founder of and we were like both like, you know, judging pitches that weekend, and we were talking, and I might have mentioned, you know, I'm Colombian, you know, and like and of course, you know, like then like white people will be like, oh, I've been to somewhere, like that generally happens. And so it's like, oh, I was in Panama, and I asked him, oh, what were you doing in Panama? And he very seriously, and I want to say this again, just in case, you know, for our audience, this was I was a judge. He was a judge. We were on a panel about to judge pitches at this business entrepreneurship startup event. And he goes and says, you know, when I ask, what were you up to in Panama? And he goes and says, hard drugs, fast women. And I remember being like, and this is, and Natalie will tell you this is true, like it's very hard for me to be speechless. Like I'm a Leo. However, I was so shocked, Nolan. I was like, I was not expecting, like one shouldn't ever expect to deal with that. However, like there's certain, you know, scenarios where like, oh, maybe 0.1% chance that it's going to happen in this scenario, but like what here?
Yeah.
And so I remember like, I was like, I didn't have like a fast reply. And then a few years later, I read Shonda Rhimes' book, The Year of Yes. And in it, I want to say it was either there or I had the opportunity to, you know, like check one of her speaking events, you know, around the book launch for The Year of Yes. And she said something along the lines of like, not appropriate. You know, like, and that hack, and I'm going to say that, like that hack of knowing I don't need to say more, I don't need to say less. All I can just say is that's not appropriate and just leave it at that was so helpful. Unfortunately, it was like a little bit too late for me to like leverage that hack in that moment. However, even knowing that that's enough, and like you don't need to like actually like go into details, just calling it out in such a simple way was such a helpful hack in terms of knowing how to manage. And unfortunately, there might be future situations of like isms, you know, whether it's, you know, like ableism or homophobia or like Islamophobia or like racism, you know, like sexism. There's so many to choose from, Nolan. And just knowing that like there's a simple way, and obviously this is like safety is important, right? Like if someone feels safe to speak up, to leverage that. I think, and I'm gonna like, let me do this very quickly. Brittany Packnet has started this very cool hashtag, or at least I saw it from Brittany's. Let me just see, Brittany Packnet, and I think it's called hashtag Pass the Privilege. And I think here it is. And so if anyone wants to follow Brittany Packnet on Twitter, the Twitter handle is Miss Pacyetti, and it is, let me find out. I'm like hoping that I'm remembering correctly. I want to say it's hashtag Pass the Privilege. And the reason I'm bringing up hashtag Pass the Privilege is because spend your privilege. Okay, there's another one. Hashtag spend your privilege is because in as much as I want to make sure that we're talking about sometimes it might not be safe to speak up. I feel like a lot of people are hiding behind that, and actually it might be safe for them because they have enough privilege that it's safe for them to be able to speak up. And so just shout out to Brittany Packnet and the hashtag spend your privilege. And so anyone who's checking out, you know, this hashtag Leapfroggers live series, you know, think about leapfrogging and hacking, also not just in terms of like what you can do, how you can leapfrog your own business, or like how you can hack your own startup. How can you also leapfrog and hack society, you know, like to help more people be able to leapfrog and hack the status quo.
Yeah, absolutely. And bringing that not just into the leadership world, but then you said kind of change the world that our lives in, and that in turn will help entrepreneurship itself, definitely. So where does Pipeline Angels go from here? What are your goals, and what would you like to attain and create in the next few years?
That's a huge question. I say one of the first things is that we have 50 plus portfolio companies. And since most of them, I'd say, our members invested in them in the friends and family round, the favorite term that like Natalie loves, a lot of them are growing, you know, and the hope is like they are leapfrogging. And so that means that some of them are in the follow-on stage, you know, of funding. And so helping create an ecosystem where we can also ensure that they're, pun intended, you know, getting through the pipeline. And also a huge thing that I often remind people is that I want to make sure that we're not perpetuating systems that we're aiming to disrupt. And what I mean by that is who are the white guys of women's networks? White women, you know? And so I don't think that the answer is getting more white women to invest only in more white women, you know? So how can we make sure that we are being broad, we're being inclusive, and by getting more people to become investors, it also translates into more people getting funding.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're going to wrap up over here. We're kind of reaching our time limit, but I want to thank you so much for joining me on our first LEAPFROG Live. It was a great time interviewing you. Thank you so much. We will be back next week at 1 p.m. on Tuesday with Nina Vaca, who is the chairman and CEO of Pinnacle Group. So I want to thank you again for joining us, and we'll see everybody else soon. Thank you so much.
Nolan, before you say goodbye to everyone, also thank you for hosting, and congrats on your first ever Leapfroggers Live series event. So thanks so much for joining me. Bye.
Great. Have a good afternoon. Bye.